back to the GIA, where we've all been a cohort member at some point along the way. And one of the things I thought would be fun to talk about with this group is that what we didn't probably fully appreciate, I know I didn't, is the relationships and the bonds that you create with not only the people who are in your cohort, but others who are there before and come after. And I think it's something that, to me, is very important and valuable. And getting back together with all of you, just occasionally even, but it just kind of brings a little spark in my heart, if you will, that it's so good to see you all. And so I'm just kind of curious, what stories might you be able to share with some of your own experiences to that end? What are some of the relationships that you developed, and some of the friendships and the unexpected bonds that got created for you?
Well, it's great to be here. You want to start first?
I was just going to say that Kyle, when he was living here, I would normally not work as hard as I would normally. And so he's contacted me constantly. Steve, let's go grinding. Grinding as in we're going to different coffee shops and working probably twice as much as I'm used to. So he's a good push.
I appreciate that input there, Steve. And actually, even before we started kind of working together at different coffee shops, I think didn't you say in my Airbnb, you run my Airbnb when I was gone for a month or two, and you're like, hey, looking for an Airbnb, and it's just funny how that all works out, where you're like, oh, well, I know someone who went through the GIA 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and so yeah, it's been awesome in that regard.
I came from enterprise software world where speed of trust is what enterprise sales was all about. And I felt like the relationships are at its highest, its peak in software. And then you walk into the insurance world and then it's like relationships are on steroid. Yeah. And so I think 2019 cohort, it was 10 of us, right? And I remember almost everyone was ready with a product and I wasn't, so I was trying to build one. But I think there was a lot of learning from each other, so which was an amazing aspect of, for somebody like me, who has spent most of my career in a different field and coming into doing something very different. And I still cherish those days. It was cold. Very, very cold. I remember at least 3 vortex, negative 40 degrees during those times, but it was well worth it.
Very productive.
Right? It was very cold. That was one of my biggest memories walking over here. I had my knee replaced the year before, and I stepped over a snowbank, and I got the worst pain that I'd had since that surgery when I stepped over that giant snowbank. And I thought, coming from Minnesota to Des Moines, I thought I'd get maybe a little bit of a break from the winter, which of course I didn't.
Yeah, I would say one of my favorite things is that when new cohorts come in, and even when people return with their companies, we can just dive right into the deep questions without having to start at a high level. I don't know, sometimes when you meet other people in the startup world, what question is okay to ask without being too personal, and it's easier to peel off the layers here because we've all been through very similar things, at least with the 100 days in the program.
Yeah. Jim and I don't talk very often, but anytime we chat, it's like we're on, we were just friends for forever.
Right. Yeah.
Were you in the same cohort?
We were. Actually, the 3 of us were in the same cohort.
Yeah.
And I think I can safely say that I'm probably the luckiest guy here to see not only the success that Jack has had, but also Jim. Both of you guys have done tremendously well. And it's especially interesting for someone like Jack. He acknowledged that he was coming into it new, but if there were a cohort that was coming in, and so frequently at the start of the program, they ask people for recommendations on what you should do, and I always think if you could just follow what Jack did.
Not everything.
It's all, we all make mistakes.
Sure.
I'm sure you made mistakes, but the reality is that you did so many things right.
Yep.
And I have just an enormous amount of respect for that, and it's so fun to see the success that you've had, again, as well as you have, Jim. And that doesn't take anything from Steve, Lana, Kyle or myself or any other cohort,
No.
because we've all got our own unique pathway. And I think to me, that's maybe one of the strongest realizations that I've come away from it, is that every person has their own path to carve. But at the same time, it's also a commonality in recognizing, to the point that you were making earlier, we can all speak that same language because we've all been through it. We know what it's like.
And I think that was the last cohort that was 100% on site, right? 2019, I remember I would travel here every Monday morning, go back on Thursday or Friday. But I think being in person next to each other, it was really awesome to you basically check yourself out from everything else that's going on, and you immersed into this what is a lifetime opportunity you want to create for yourself and others involved, and the reflection. And we used to run ideas by each other, right? And so
I think there's a spirit of collaboration that exists as well, because even Kyle and I, an hour ago, sitting down and talking about ideas, trading ideas, and I think we all recognize that somebody else can see things that we don't see, and there's an awareness of the need for that, and also an interest in people wanting to share and help each other.
You know, the alumni network was something I didn't fully appreciate, and I'm pouring myself into that now, of course, in this role. But one of the things that I loved about, even when in just one cohort, is the competitiveness, in a good way, to your point, like pushing you harder. But also, I remember like Trevor and Jake and others, just how good they were at presenting and pitching and figuring things out, and just being able to go back to these same individuals now and say, hey, we talk about things like, hey, how would you do this?
That's
or
right.
if I needed to figure out how do I embed insurance? Who do I talk to? Or how do I do different challenges? Your growth success, and how you figured out how to really hone in and raise capital, all these issues, all these best practices that we can help each other with. To me, that's a really interesting part of what lies ahead.
And what about timing? How important do you think it is, timing, in your business model, for example? How important was, coming to Iowa, to the GIA,
Yep.
and your vision as far as the timing of cybersecurity in that point in time?
I could not have chosen any better timing to get started, because you have this wave, and this is still a bigger wave. It's actually bigger than used to be, and it was unfortunate that the COVID cycle accelerated that. It was fortunate for business, and of course, and unfortunate it was a pandemic. But because of that, I remember the day one we launched in California, we were sheltered in March 17 of 2020. And so like, okay, you want to go out, you launch your product, and everyone is sheltered in. But that actually worked in a benefit, because everyone was in the living room, and the platform did the work for everyone. So the timing was, it was great for me. But also, I don't know if you could have done that without the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right? You build amazing businesses in Silicon Valley, but not insurance businesses to a degree.
Yeah. I found that out. I lived in California. I was actually in March 2020 as well.
Yep.
And after that, everything changed. I
Yep.
was working outside all the time.
Yep.
But it was, it's an interesting, dynamic, I guess, when you've got, your vision, and then you've got other worldly things happening,
Yep.
and how that can help your vision or can hinder it.
Yep.
Another thing I thought was interesting is that just getting into the GIA was a big deal. I remember thinking, I can't believe we're so early stage, and for whatever reason they see something in all of us, and they believed in us. It kind of made you think, well, they must see something. We better give this our best effort. And then when you get with the other founders, you're thinking, these are all pretty capable people, and what I really think is interesting is how everyone was pulling for us.
Yep.
You know, the investor companies, the carriers, you know, you're getting meetings with these organizations you could never get, and you're so early, but yet that was okay. They were helping kind of get your idea nurtured and in some cases help you get off of the idea you thought you needed to be on. I mean, we'd all be doing something very different if we would have stuck with what we thought, but we all were smart enough to listen to others and pivot.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, coming from Michigan, you know, I've never been to Iowa before, and, you know, before coming to the GIA, and I was surprised by how amazing Des Moines is, the startup ecosystem here with all the resources and, you know, the different accelerators going on and the different like co-working spaces and just all of us in general, like that support that you're talking about. And like coffee shops are a big thing for me, right? Like I do a ton of work from coffee shops, and there's some amazing coffee shops in the neighborhood. And I think like Des Moines is like a hidden jewel that a lot of people don't really talk about, like especially like in the Midwest. Like, what, you're in, you know, Des Moines, like cornfields everywhere, right? It's like, no, like this is an awesome city, like, you know. So I think we're very lucky to be in Des Moines.
One thing that,
Traffic.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's comfortable without traffic.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
was just in New York this weekend.
Perks-
and I was
perks
like,
of Des
oh,
Moines.
It takes forever
Yep.
to get anywhere.
The only thing I felt a little bit cheated on was that we got here and they gave us that tour and they showed us they had that keg thing back there with the spigot on it.
Yeah.
And we never did get to use that.
That's right.
It was like was there to tease us or something.
Maybe there's a placebo.
Was it actually alcohol in there?
Well, I believe there was, but I can tell you that there was a place next door, a couple places next door that they did serve in, and I remember a lot of late night inspiration going on in those. After some of the
Right,
pitches,
right.
we'd all go over to, you know, we'd go to some organization, and you know, there's something about you, almost like this courage under fire together. You've all just survived, you know, kind of the shock, and you have this camaraderie, and you go socialize together,
right.
and you know, it's an amazing formula, really.
I ate same lunch every day in the back, in the restaurant right behind the building here, and I would just show up and they would know exactly what I need.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.